because of some technical issues. Okay. So in this presentation, we are going to go through some slides on postmodernity, which is a period that appeared after or happened after modernity period, and also postmodernism, which is also a way of um, thinking, a way of constructing things also that came after modernism. Okay, so this is a postmodernist building, and we're looking at architecture here because modernism and postmodernism can be clearly seen in architecture. Now, if we look at works of literature, we would have to read works of literature. But in architecture, we can see in front of our eyes what postmodernism means and what also modernism means. Before the construction of buildings, I mean, at the beginning, when society constructed modernist building, they tended to be box-like, you know, or like flats, box-like, and because many modernists believe in the idea of efficiency. So, in order to make full use of spaces, they invented houses that resemble boxes, so that all parts of the house could be useful to the inhabitants. During the postmodernist period, um, some theories of postmodernism challenge this idea of efficiency. Efficiency is when you think about making full use of something, like um, having box-like houses and so on. Yeah? So some postmodernist theories challenge this idea of efficiency because they felt like box-like houses did not cater to the um, kind of like the human aspect of ourselves, which require that our habitation, our residences appear to be um, welcoming and fun to live in, and so on. Yeah? So the postmodernists wanted to challenge this idea of efficiency in modernist buildings. So they created buildings that resemble people, resembled ships, sometimes bullets, sometimes apa ni? Um, fun things, everyday things. So from here, in this building here, which is in, if I'm not mistaken, in Barcelona, Spain, we can see these two strange-looking buildings, and this building is actually meant to resemble a pair of dancers, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. There are this pair of dancers. They used to be very famous in the 1950s and 60s. So here we have a building that resembles Fred Astaire, and then Ginger Rogers would lean towards him. Yeah, and this is the next building is Ginger Rogers. It's meant to represent Ginger Rogers. Okay, so this type of buildings began to appear throughout the world, and today we have for Malaysia, I think the first postmodernist building would be Tabung Haji because it resembles a tabung, or a place where you keep your money. And then we could see KLCC also, and then Perpustakaan Negara or National Library. And the National Library is meant to resemble a tengkolok. And then many other buildings that followed suit. So these buildings changed the way people built buildings, and this idea of postmodernism changed the way architecture and architects build their buildings. So, why change from modernity to postmodernity? Modernity is defined as a period of condition loosely identified with the progressive era, the Industrial Revolution, and the Enlightenment. Even though modernism itself is a reaction against the Enlightenment period with its emphasis on reason. So, in philosophy and critical theory, postmodernity refers to the state or condition of society which is said to exist after modernity, a historical condition that marks the reasons for the end of modernity. This usage is ascribed to the philosophers Jean-Francois Lyotard and Jean Baudrillard. So, one project of modernity is said by Habermas to have been the fostering of progress by incorporating principles of rationality and hierarchy into public and artistic life. So, um, so one project of modernity is said to have been the fostering of progress by incorporating principles of rationality and hierarchy. So, in the period after that, uh, came thinkers like Lyotard. So, I understood modernity as a cultural condition characterized by constant change in the pursuit of progress. So, while modernity could be termed as, or at least modernism could be termed as being a state of progress because it means being up to date, even though postmodernism itself is challenging the idea of progress. Um, modernity postmodernity that came after modernity um, represents the culmination of this process where constant change has become the status quo and the notion of progress obsolete. Okay, so um, the idea of progress itself becomes obsolete, becomes a bit useless because change itself happened so much in our postmodern period that um, the idea of progress is somewhat questionable again, because even though it was questionable before, and like nowadays, we live in an age where we are questioning again whether our progress is actually progress, because nowadays we have pollution, we have carbon dioxide emission that is causing the climate change and so on. So the idea of progress actually goes together with the refutations against progress itself. Yeah? The idea of progress is being questioned also. So in the postmodernity period, Lyotard said that it is characterized by constant change, and the notion of progress is actually useless, because there is always changes in our um, idea of progress. Okay, one good example is our fight against COVID-19. Um, in today's world, okay, the governments are talking about vaccine, right? Vaccine against to fight against COVID-19. But what we hear right now, and what you would think that the vaccine is being very modern, right? It's up to date, it's the latest technology. But then you have something like mutation in COVID-19 virus that is right now being found in the UK. Okay, they found a mutation against the latest COVID virus situation inside UK community. Yeah? And then now the idea of progress, the idea of vaccine is somewhat is thrown abroad, because thrown out of the window, because now we don't really know whether the vaccine can really protect us against COVID-19, because we have another strain of COVID-19. Okay? So this is what is happening. Once you think that you are progressing, then you will find that something will hold you back. Something will say that actually you're not progressing. There are changes happening again. That causes you to uh, go back and rethink about your idea of progress, whether you have made actually any progress at all. So, following Ludwig Wittgenstein's critique of the possibility of absolute and total knowledge, Yoda further argued that the various meta-narratives of progress, such as positivist science, Marxism, and structuralism, were defined as methods of achieving progress. So, Yoda said that various meta-narratives are big stories, they actually, like Marxism, they actually tell you why you are being created, what happens in life, and what happens after you die, and so on. So there are meta narratives. Islam is also another meta narrative. It is telling you everything about life. So once in this period of postmodernity, Wittgenstein is questioning whether meta narratives can actually explain life. Because there is no longer the idea of progress, and no, we cannot really make sense of this world anymore, according to Wittgenstein. Um, so postmodernity itself is a condition or state of being associated with changes to institutions and conditions, and with social and political results and innovations globally, but especially in the West since the 1950s. So this took part in the West in the 1950s. Whereas postmodernism is an aesthetic, literary, political, and social philosophy, the cultural and intellectual phenomenon, especially since 1920s, new movements in the arts. So postmodernism is linked to the arts, linked to literature, linked to political philosophy, social philosophy, rather than postmodernity, which is a time frame. Now, the period has had diverse political ramifications. Its anti-ideological ideas appear to have been associated with the feminist movement, racial equality movements, gay rights movement, anti-globalization movement. So this is just one of the ideas that appeared during this um, new appearance, okay, this new appearance or latest appearance of theories like racial equality movement and so on. So it's one of the movements that followed this movement, that appeared together with this movement. It follows many modernist ideas, rejecting differences between high and low forms of art, rejecting rigid genre distinctions, emphasizing pastiche, parody, irony, and playfulness. But while it's similar to modernism, it differs in its attitude towards many of these trends. So it has similarity to modernist work. Postmodernism in literature has similarity to modernism in literature, but it emphasizes pastiche, parody, irony, and playfulness. So there is an element of fun in postmodernist work, because pastiche is you know putting together different sources of words and sentences, and then putting together all of these things in the work of literature. Parody is making fun of an earlier work. Irony, providing irony. It looks at ironic instances in life, perhaps, and then transmitting it into a form of literature and so on. Yeah? So it deals with something fun. Modernism, for example, tends to present a fragmented view of human subjectivity and history, but presents that fragmentation as something to be I'm sorry, something tragic. Huh? So there's no something to be here, to be something here, something to be lamented, mourned as a loss. So this modernism, this idea that life is fragmented. No? We are all, born in a world where we are exposed to various ideas coming from the West and the East. Our life is fragmented. We say that we are Muslims, but in universities, for example, we study Western knowledge and Western what do you call that, sciences, that are devoid from um, any religious or spiritual element. So we are fragmented in that way. Um, but to the modernists, this is something that is sad, that should be lamented. Huh? Hence, the generally unhappy novels of 20th century modernism. So, um, some of these novels, they talk about the loss of God, the loss of God in human lives, a loss of sense of purpose of living, and so on. So they tended to have a very negative and bleak view of life. Um, Many modernist works uphold the idea that literature and art can provide unity, coherence, and meaning, moral lesson, which has been lost in most of modern life. Art will do what other human institutions fail to do. So modernists believe that art is the only thing that can bring progress because it can show you different techniques, new techniques of writing literature, of drawing paintings, and so on. Yeah? So art will do what other human institutions have failed to do. So postmodernism, in contrast, doesn't lament the idea of fragmentation or incoherence, but rather celebrates it. The world is meaningless. Let's not pretend that art and literature can make meaning. Then let's play with nonsense. Okay, so that is the idea. Again, the difference between modernism and postmodernism is that postmodernism celebrates this lost sense of purpose and of tradition and values, encouraging experimentation in art and the use of reasons and logic in art. Um, it celebrates this sense of a purposeless life, instead of lamenting it. So that is the big difference between modernism and postmodernism. So another issue at the center of debate between modernism and postmodernism is the extent to which the legacy of Enlightenment values is still crucial for this new age. So this is not complete here. I had overlooked that. I'm sorry about this. So modernism, what this says is actually modernism rejects the idea of the Enlightenment because it says that science is not actually progressing, it's bringing destruction. And the only reality, the only progress that we can see in this world is in arts. But postmodernism looks at the past, it takes, it celebrates the past, it takes inspiration from the past. So it doesn't completely reject tradition. In fact, many of the writings, sometimes they quote um, past writers, and they try to reinterpret in postmodernist films, for example, like Maleficent. It tries to reinterpret um, the what do you call that? The Sleeping Beauty. It creates something from the past. It's inspired by the past. Okay, so Jean-Francois Lyotard, is a French philosopher, and he is perhaps the first few people who began to talk about postmodernism. So Lyotard attacks the Enlightenment project because it is a totalizing explanation of everything, as are Marxism, Christianity, and the myth of scientific progress. So he calls these totalizing explanations as grand narratives. He argues that while they seem to explain and reassure that the world can be understood as a structure, they are really illusions fostered to smother differences, oppositions, and familiarity. So you have Lyotard, who attacks the Enlightenment project. Attacks the idea of science, even though in postmodernism we have a celebration of the past also. Um, though they didn't really reject completely the past, but Lyotard himself rejected Enlightenment project. And then um, there is no what do you call that? There's no real progress in life. There are He rejected grand narratives. Grand narratives are meta narratives, the same thing. And he said that these grand narratives, um, they are just there um, to ensure that to tell people that everything that happens in life happens because of a reason. Okay, so the narrative gives a reason to our existence, but he says these are just illusions. These reasons are just illusions. Our What happened to us cannot be explained. There is no systematic explanation or logical explanation for what happens in this life. So the grand narratives are no longer applicable. All that mankind can hope for is to study the world as a series of micro narratives, which are small stories which might explain a certain set of phenomena, but does not make any claim to universal truths. So he said that in this world there exist micro narratives, small stories. Everyone has their own explanation about life, about what they think about life, and this explanation become our micro narrative, the stories that we tell ourselves, okay, about what is the meaning of life. There is no um, macro narrative, a big grand narrative, which will tell us everything, which is true for everyone. There's no truth for everyone. They're just relative truths. We all believe in our own micro narratives. So, but because postmodernism does not accept grand narratives on which fundamental religious beliefs depend, they are constantly being challenged by so-called fundamentalist religious groups. Okay, so um, here it says that they are constantly being challenged by so-called fundamentalist religious groups because there is no grand narrative. Muslims, for example, ban Salman Rushdie. Many Muslim countries, Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses is being banned. The novel itself is being banned. And then protests against books by J.K. Rowling by conservative Christians. Okay, so Christians also protest against J.K. Rowling because J.K. Rowling uh, wrote in Harry Potter about a world that is full of wizards, and they do not follow any particular religion. They have their own way of living and so on. So conservative Christians felt that this was going against the idea of Christianity. So they protested against the book. So another thinker that uh, gave an explanation about postmodernism, the age that we are living in, was born in 1929 and he died in 2007. And he is a key figure in postmodernism. He says that commodities that you buy are all signifiers. Now, this is another explanation for what is happening in this world, and is more related to commerce. Okay, so according to John Baudrillard, you buy stuff not necessarily because you will use it or because it gives you pleasure, but because the stuff means something beyond itself. It is a signifier that points to a signifier. So that signifier, according to Baudrillard, is a social status within a variety of social codes or model. Thus, when you buy a car, you don't just buy any car to drive around in. The car you buy is a signifier of your social position, your income level, your recreational habits, your political or environmental views, whether you have children or not, etc. So nowadays we live in an age where a signifier has many signifiers. Okay, so this is no longer a car that you can um, just drive. It has more meanings in the sense that the first car, for example, would probably be driven by somebody who is adventurous, who likes to go to forests or jungles, explore things and so on. So the person who's driving the solar powered car, for example, is very environmentally conscious. Okay, the person who is driving this kind of like hip hop car would probably love hip hop music and so on. Yeah, And then the person who wants to buy a Jaguar, a favorite car among many of my students, uh, would probably value wealth and so on. It's very immensely rich because Jaguars are very expensive. So we have different, we have signifiers, this pictures, the motor, the pictures themselves and the vehicle themselves, but they carry more than the signifiers mean more than the thing itself. It also represents status, social status. So yeah, so someone who buys and drives a Jaguar is signifying something different from those who buy a hybrid car. What is being signified is, in fact, your position as a person. According to Baudrillard, identity is the product of signifier with which one surrounds oneself. Now, Baudrillard takes this idea of signifier-signified relationship further by discussing his idea called simulacrum. So, simulacrum um, what are no, um, signifiers, okay, uh, which are representations that point to something beyond or outside of the signifiers themselves, the simulacrum. And then simulacrum originally meant likeness, similarity, used to describe a representation such as statue or painting, especially of a god. But in late 19th century, an image, it represented an image without the substance or qualities of the original. So philosopher Frederick Jameson offers photorealism as an example of artistic simulacrum, where a painting is sometimes created by copying a photograph that is itself a copy of the real. Yeah. So, but in the world of mass media, where Baudrillard studies, there are signifiers without any real signifiers. So, for example, Mickey Mouse is a signifier in movies and television series, but the signifier does not refer to any single signifier, a real mouse called Mickey. So, simulacrums are signifiers without any real signifiers. A signifier does not mirror or reproduce or imitate or copy reality, they are reality itself. For example, here, Mickey Mouse. It's a signifier, but there is no signifier. There's no real mouse called Mickey. John Baudrillard points to a reversal of the relation between representation and reality, where the media is coming to constitute hyper reality. Sorry about this. A media reality which seems more real than real. The distinction between the real and the representation collapses and dissolves away. All that truly can be said to be left is simulacra itself. Okay. So the media, for example, it fosters this idea of hyper reality when it creates, for example, places where the simulacrum appear. Okay, for example, in um, in television, sometimes we want to sell something, we could label it. I saw, not so long ago, there was an advertisement for makeup, but the makeup actually does not exist. It's created by somebody, but it's labeled. It's given a label, and then this is the problem. There is no real signified that represents the product itself. Okay. For example, this is Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. They live in Disneyland. Disneyland is meant to be a kind of like fairy tale site, where you can see all the characters um, live in, right? Where all the characters live in, and this is not really true. Disneyland is a hyper reality, hyper real world. There is no reality to it. It's just created reality. Um, so hyperreality is significant as a paradigm to explain current cultural conditions. Consumerism, because of its reliance on sign exchange value, For example, brand X shows that one is fashionable, car Y indicates one's wealth, could be seen as a contributing factor in the creation of hyperreality or the hyperreal condition. So hyperreality is a way. Why do places like Disneyland, for example, exist? Because um, the creators wanted to sell their products, wanted to sell the idea that there is a mouse called Mickey Mouse. You know? There is his partner, Minnie Mouse. They wanted to sell this product, so they created the world of hyperreality. And in the same way, you can also take um, something that you have baked, in the oven, and then we can say that um, it belongs to a certain brand, for example. So if you and you can do a commercial on that brand, we can see where you can see actors eating the food that is what do you call that, produced under a certain brand, and they are all happy, they are happy eating the product, and then they live in a house that is also full of products that are made in, under the same brand and so on. So it creates the idea that there is a place, there are people who live like that using that brand. Okay, like IKEA, for example. IKEA is, in a way, you can argue that it's a hyper real world because, if the producers insist that that you live in this place full of things that are made by IKEA, it is creating the idea that there is something called IKEA living. That you can live a certain lifestyle with all the IKEA products, and if you don't buy IKEA, you cannot live that lifestyle. So this is the thing, and all of this is created to sell things. Okay. In Western thought, since Plato, Baudrillard points out um, Baudrillard points out the idea of an original or real thing has been favored over the idea of an imitation or copy. This is particularly evident in the arts, where the first edition of a famous work for literature works is worth a lot of money, while a print of or 18th edition is worth very little. So Baudrillard also points out that in this hyperreal world, the first edition, sorry, not in the hyperreal world, in the previous period before postmodernism, yeah, there is the idea of an original work that is worth more than the copies that followed it. Okay, um, especially important here is the first edition of famous works like literary works. The first edition is always more expensive than the following editions. Now, in postmodernism mass media, however, the original largely disappears and only copies exist. An example is in music CDs. There is no original master version of any music CD, but only thousands and thousands of copies. Another example is the painting by Andy Warhol. Um, you see this painting of Marilyn Monroe. Yeah? It is simply that there is no original painting that actually produce Marilyn's picture uh, like this one. It's just a photocopy. It's made by printing. It's not, there is no original to this. Okay, so postmodernism literature, and this is where we turn to literature. Postmodern literature is literature characterized by heavy reliance on techniques like fragmentation, paradox, and questionable narratives, and is often, though not exclusively, defined as a style or trend which emerged in the post-World War II era. Hence, there are similarities between modernism and postmodernist literature. Now, this postmodernist appeared after the World War II, and modernism appeared at the beginning of the 20th century and lasted until World War II. Okay, so it is not specifically a movement, but tends to converge with various critical theories, particularly readers' response deconstructionist approaches. So postmodern literature is commonly defined in relation to a precursor. For example, a modernist literature work has a neatly tied up ending, but postmodernist literature does not conclude neatly. So the great difference between both modernism and postmodernism literature is that while we both give great prominence to fragmentation as a feature of 20th century art and culture, they do so in very different modes. One is lamenting fragmentation, the other is celebrating it. So some characteristic of postmodernist literature is the use of irony, playfulness, or black humor, and black humor. Linda Hutchian claimed postmodernism fiction as a whole could be characterized by the ironic quote marks that much of it can be taken as tongue-in-cheek. This irony, along with black humor and the general concept of play related to the reader's concept, are amongst the most recognizable aspects of postmodernism. It is common for postmodernists to treat serious subjects in a playful and humorous way. So the central concept of Joseph Heller's Catch-22, which is the famous novel, it's about a pilot who requested a psychological evaluation, hoping to be found not sane enough to fly. In the World War, he was involved in the World War II. He hopes by taking this psychological assessment, he will be found to be insane, to be crazy. So he will escape going to war. So, but in order to if he were to request the psychological evaluation, he would demonstrate that he is sane. Okay, but he wants to actually demonstrate that he's insane. So through the psychological assessment. So this is the catch-22. He cannot really volunteer to what do you call that, to be tested under the psychological evaluation, because to do that he would be declaring that he's actually sane, and then this goes against his intention, which is to prove that he's insane because he doesn't want to go to the war. Okay, so it's a catch-22 situation. So another aspect of postmodernism is intertextuality. It's the relationship between one text, a novel, for example, and another, or one text within the interwoven fabric of literary history. Intertextuality in postmodern literature can be a reference or a parallel to another literary work, an extended discussion of work, or an adaptation of style. So Umberto echoes the name of the rose, takes on the form of a detective novel, and makes references to authors such as Aristotle, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Borges. So pastiche is another element of postmodernist works. It's related to postmodern intertextuality. It means to combine or paste together multiple elements. In postmodernist literature, this can be an homage to or a parody of past styles. It can be seen as a representation of the chaotic, pluralistic, or information-drenched aspects of postmodern society. It can be a combination of multiple genres to create a unique narrative or to comment on situations in postmodernity. So, for example, Thomas Pynchon includes in his novels elements from detective fiction, science fiction, and war fiction, songs, pop culture references, well-known obscure and fictional history, mixed together real, contemporary, and historical figures. So something like what you can find in, I think, Forrest Gump. I think in Forrest Gump we have many of these elements, right? It could be, in a way, it could be science fiction because you can get you see a guy who can walk really fast, even though there was previously something wrong with the way he was walking, right? So it is also, it could be a war fiction also against the Vietnam War. Okay, so it could be that. Temporal distortion is another characteristic of postmodern narrative. This is a common technique in modernist fiction also, yes. Fragmentation and non-linear narratives are central features in both modern and postmodern literature. So this is when, for example, the novel starts at the middle, and then in the middle of the book, it will be talking about the beginning of the novel and so on. So there are temporal distortions, and sometimes the characters will, if it's a novel story, yeah, inside the narrative, you will find references, flashbacks to the past, and the characters live as if they are unaware that events in the past was or were happening at present, um, at the present time. So another element of postmodernism is magic realism. Magic realism may be employed by a writer of a literary work who uses, oh sorry about this, who uses still sharply defined, smoothly painted images of figures and objects depicted in a surrealistic manner. The themes and subjects are often imaginary, somewhat outlandish and fantastic, and with a certain dreamlike quality. So, in magic realism, something magical happens in everyday life. Like in Harry Potter, it's a work of magic realism. There is no real distinction between a magical event that happens in the life of the author and reality itself. Reality has magical events. So another feature is paranoia, perhaps demonstrated most famously and effectively in Joseph Haller's Catch-22 and the work of Thomas Pynchon, The Sense of Paranoia. The belief that there is an ordering system behind the chaos of the world is another recurring postmodern theme. When you feel that there is something um, that is behind all the chaos that is happening in this world. Okay, so this produces a sense of paranoia in yourself because you cannot really understand what is happening in this world. Yeah, but you believe there is something or somebody is ordering everything, every event that is happening in this world. And then minimalism. Literary minimalism can be characterized as a focus on a surface description where readers are expected to take an active role in the creation of a story. The characters in minimalist thoughts, in minimalist stories and novels tend to be unexceptional. Uh, among these amongst among those categorized as postmodernist, literary minimalism is the most commonly associated with Samuel Beckett. Samuel Beckett wrote The Waiting for Godot, and the words that are um, the conversation between Vladimir and Estragon very have they only exchange a few words with each other. So their conversation is very minimalist. So there's nothing outstanding about the characters themselves. It's just minimalist. Um, it is in itself producing its kind of mystery because the characters do not really speak more than they should. So deconstruction, as what we have learned during post-structuralism, is simply the postmodernist way of reading a text. One of the most popular postmodernist tendencies within aesthetics is deconstruction. Deconstruction work um, entirely within the studied text to expose and undermine its frame of references, assumptions, and ideological foundations. Um, although deconstructions can be developed using different methods and techniques, the process typically involves demonstrating the multiple interpretations of a text and their resulting internal conflicts and subversive binary oppositions. Okay. Um, so deconstructing a text is simply exposing that there is no center in a text. A text lends itself to many interpretations, many ways of reading. Yeah? Um, and once you think that you have the theme of the work, when you deconstruct it, you find that the whole story is actually very unstable in the sense that there are elements that events that happen within the story they show that which does not support the theme. Deconstructors see works in terms of their indecidability. They reject the structuralist view that a work of literary art is demonstrably unified from beginning to end in one certain way, or that is organized around a single center that ultimately can be identified. As a result, deconstructors see text as more radical, heterogeneous, than do um, structuralists. So, do you have any question? I'm sorry about the grammatical mistakes in the slide because I will look at this again, and make the corrections. But what do you have any questions that you want to ask?
Doctor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
What is the difference between magical realism and surrealism?
Okay. Surrealism, as far as I know, okay, um, is related to it is everything is surrealistic. A surrealist painting, for example, because this is a term that is more related to arts. A surrealistic um, painting, for example, is full of um, what do you call that? Pictures or representations that show that they exist in a not so real world. It's not in a world that is not real, that does not at all resemble um, our world. But magic realism work, a work of magic realism, it's like Harry Potter because everything exists together. The magical world exists in the real world. So Harry, for example, he departs to Hogwarts by boarding a train that could be found in one of the train stations, right? I forgot which one. Um, and then he has friends who come from the real world, and he goes back to the real world every um, at the end of every term. So the magical world exists together. Yeah. Another work of magical realism is 101 Years of Solitude. Right? So this is by what is his name? I forgot about his name. Garcia Lorca. Garcia Lorca wrote 1,000. I think it's 1,000. I don't know, 100, 1,000 Years in Solitude. Um, about a family that has in through various generations keep breeding uh, generations a, that have kind of like something like a tail at the back of their body. They have tails. Okay, so it's the generations exist in the world, in the real world, the world that we live in, not a magical world. But surrealistic is more like everything is magical. Yeah. So there's no reality that we can identify with in a surrealistic world. Okay. So anyone wants to ask anything? Um, anyone?
Doctor,
Yeah.
in modernism, we have the old versus the new as the binary opposition. What about the postmodernism?
Okay. Postmodernism is it's like sometimes it represents our the problem, the dilemma that we are living in. We say that we are modern. We say that we are uh, progressing, but there will be things that happen in our life which will show that we are not actually progressing. It's like COVID-19. People are talking about vaccine, about defeating COVID, about going back to university, right? In March, for example, the um, Ministry of Education is saying that we can go back to campus on March next year. But right now, they are discovering new strains of COVID-19. Suddenly, the whole vaccine discourse is interrupted by this new appearance of uh, mutated form of COVID-19. So where is progress right now? We're back to square one. Okay, so um, the idea of post-modernity as modernity thought modernity was the idea was the period where inventions were being invented like television, modern inventions were being invented like television, telephone, and so on. So they thought that they were experiencing progress in a way, but then suddenly First World War happened. So they saw a lot of deaths. And in Second World War, we have nuclear bombing, and that caused a lot of deaths also. So people were arguing that maybe we're not really progressing. We're killing each other with the things that we thought signified progress. So this is the idea. What is progress anymore? No. Um, and right now also we live in a post-modernist period, which actually accept the idea that we are scientific, that we use our reason, but it's also saying that sometimes we are ruled by our desire also. So postmodernist is more accepting of that, that we could be progressing, but at the same time we could be regressing, we could become worse. So the two ideas exist together. They build they take their inspiration, postmodernist work of literature, postmodernism in literature, they take their examples from the past. For example, you see movies like Maleficent, movies like Shrek, for example. So they don't throw away the past. Like in modernism, they try to throw away everything from the past. They try to create something new. But in postmodernist work, they are looking at the past for inspiration. Nowadays we have a Maleficent one, actually we don't have Maleficent two, right? So we have Maleficent, and then uh, what else? We have many. The Huntsman. What do you call that? The Snow White and the Huntsman. Another movie from the past. It takes inspiration from Snow White. Okay, so you have that, and then why do these things happen? Why do we have this postmodernist tendency to use the past to create something else? Why do we keep? Why do the filmmakers keep doing that? One reason is that they wanted to sell things. They wanted to create something, right? And then sell it. Create something from sell it, and they don't have to figure out something new. They can take something that appear in the past, like a fairy tale, and then they can create something new to sell. This is the constant progress. This is the state of constant progress. Why do we have why do we have a state of constant progress? Because we want to sell. The people who produce this constant progress actually want to sell their products. For example, why do we have so many versions of iPhone? Why do we have so many versions of uh, BRV, okay, or cars, any cars? Why? Why do we have that? Why next year model be different? Why? Is it true, necessarily true that the present model is better than the past models? That has been proven to be wrong, right? Because one model by Samsung, for example, actually exploded. I think Samsung 7 or something like that. It's actually, it can explode in mid-air. So the idea that we are progressing is actually under question all the time. Okay, so am I clear? Okay, so anyone?
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, anyone else has a question? Do you have a question? Anyone has one? Or maybe Nurul Fahana? No, Fahana, I can see it's on top of a tree, right? Okay. Anyone else has any question?
Doctor, can you elaborate the simulacra again and how that's connected? Is it connected to that signifier signified thing, as
Yeah,
Baudrillard mentioned? Hmm.
yeah. Simulacra is like a sign of something, but that something does not it's not real. It's not something that you can find in life. For example, apa ni? Um, uh, Mickey Mouse. Okay. Now this simulacra what first appeared when they started drawing God, and I think in the Renaissance period, right? They drew God as in the form of a man, and he extended his hand to to perhaps one of his creatures. Huh? So this is the first example of a simulacra because God, nobody actually knows how God looks like, but and he's not Jesus Christ, he's God. So this is the first example of the simulacra, something that exists in our um, in the media especially, but does not have any um, signifies. Yeah, some people say that branded names are also simulacra because, like Ramly Burger, are you sure that Ramly Burger is different from other forms of burger? No, and also because you can see the burger there is a Ramly Burger. It's it's a burger, but what makes Ramly Burger different from other burgers? Yeah, what makes it? Can you just do something? You can create a burger, for example, and then give it a brand, and then try to sell it and say that this is a special burger, something that you cannot find in other places. So it's branded goods. But are really branded goods really that different from other goods? Okay, that is a question that you have to ask. People who are brand conscious, maybe they are also very conscious of simulacra because they want to create an idea about themselves that they are better than other people because they eat certain food or drive certain cars and so on. So yeah, I'm looking at Sharonism also backdrop there. You have a background picture of the sea, right? That is the simulacra itself because are you really near the beach? No, right? You're in your room, but you can see a beach behind you. Okay, what do you want to convey with that picture of a beach? Are you telling people that you are enjoying yourself, you're on vacation or something? Okay, so that is a that you want to convey an image of yourself in that way. Yeah. Um, anyone say anything? But what about this picture of Nur Farhana? This I cannot really see what kind of animal she has put on her as her what do you call that photo setting. Okay, but you see that that is Nur Farhana, right? That is represents her. Okay, that is a simulacrum. A simulacrum is actually the singular form of simulacra. So yeah.
Oh, doctor, I've got one.
Mm,
When just now you mentioned how postmodernism, it does a little bit celebrate some of the traditions and legacy of the Enlightenment. Okay, so it's got that one a little bit. But at the same time, when you were talking earlier about postmodernism, you also said that postmodernism rubbishes the idea of there's no progress. Everything's sad, everything's a lie. It's all just nonsense. That's okay. Let's celebrate that loss of purpose and have fun with it anyway. Now, so that loss of that sad, bleak sadness, and deciding to just toss it out and be happy with it.
mm,
How do we reconcile that with uh, those old enlightenment ideas with the centrality of man? Yes, we are masters of our own fate. We can do this, we can do that. Are they similar in that sense, or?
in postmodernity, they're talking about postmodernism.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Okay. I think um, the postmodernist is trying to do is just take inspiration from the past.
Mm.
For example, in works of literature, they created characters from the past, and then they kind of like created new stories, new narratives from this. And they're not saying They're saying there's no definitive meaning to anything. For example, in Sleeping Beauty, we have originally the story was about what do you call that? A woman, right? I mean, you know the story, right? It's about a young lady who was who had a spell cast on her, by this evil wicked witch. But the postmodernist was saying what made this was questioning um, why this witch became evil, and there must be a story behind that. So they're creating because they don't believe in anything such as the idea of good or evil. This world is all
Mm.
relative. So they are questioning um, everything that we know about the past, including stories, including fairy tales.
Like those grand narratives, then, like you were talking.
Uh, yeah, they're
Mm.
questioning that. No, they're saying that there's no idea of, there's not nothing such as good or bad. Everything is relative. Perhaps the person became good because he actually um had some experience in the past. I would rather say bad because okay, a person appears bad because he was actually born to be good, but then something happened to him in the past that made him bad, and then he could become good again. So there's nothing definitive about the past. Everything is open to question and then can challenge
Mm.
everything. So that is why.
Then, right, Doctor,
Uh,
is it possible to be a religious postmodernist? You can't, can you?
no, I don't think so. I don't think that is possible. Yeah.
They're a bit paradoxical, right? So postmodernist, there is no God, there is no good or bad. It's all relative to each
Mhm.
person's interpretation. So you can't tell me that there is a God in heaven and hell and everybody's going to be judged,
Yeah, that
right?
is a grand
Mm.
narrative. That is a grand narrative.
Mm.
If you believe in religion and believe in that there is heaven and hell, that is grand narrative because they're saying that there's something certain in life. And when you die, you will go to either heaven or hell. So that is certain, right? The postmodernists are saying that nothing's certain in life. Um, Even good or bad people, they're not, I mean, or good or bad deeds. Who knows why certain people kill? Maybe because they wanted to defeat somebody who has done something bad to them or something like that, because they have a reason, they have their own personal reason for doing that. So sometimes in postmodernist novel, you have characters who kill other people, and
Mm.
they're not sentenced to any kind of
They're not portrayed as bad.
huh?
They're
Yeah,
not portrayed as bad, right?
yeah, they're not perceived as being bad. They kill because they have a certain
Mm. It's
personal
justified.
reason. Yeah.
Mm.
So things like that happen in postmodernist work. Literature. Bharati Mukherjee. I remember one novel that I read when I was an undergrad, and it was titled Jasmine, 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 a character, an Indian character, was who lived in the U.S., an immigrant. So it was written by Bharati Mukherjee, and the
Mhm.
character Jasmine actually killed many people in the novel. Um, but she wasn't evil. She had her reasons. Okay, and it ended. It had an open end. I'm sorry, it had an open ending because the character wasn't caught by the police or anything like that. She just moved to one place to another, and the ending saw her moving to another place. And that's it. I mean, she's not persecuted or anything like that. No, so that is the postmodernist
Mm.
work.
Oh, doctor, in your opinion, right, when the postmodernists say we reject all grand narratives, there are no narratives. When they do that, in your
There are
opinion,
narratives. There
oh,
are
there are
mini
smaller
narratives. Mini
mini
narratives.
narratives.
Yeah.
Oh, also they're still open. Okay.
We have to have narratives because how do we understand this life? We understand this life because of our experiences in the past. It's our own stories. You all have your own stories, right? About what had happened to you that had made you the person that you are. Okay, so we have our mini narratives.
But their strong belief is that there is no universal value truth or narrative, right?
Yeah,
That would
there's
be their thing.
nothing universal about the
Ah.
narratives. It's true to your person, not anyone, not everyone else. It's true to your own person. That's it. It's very
Hmm.
personal.
Then, right, Doctor, saying that there is no grand narrative, just small ones, would that be a form of grand narrative in of itself? Because I was thinking, I had a chat the other day with some of the mates talking about religion,
Mhm.
and the contrast was that if you take an atheist who is without any theist, without any belief, the thing about atheism is that they claim their criticism, they criticize religious people because they say that religious people are close-minded and they only accept the truths that religion gives them. Then the comeback to that would be thing with atheists is that they also only strongly believe the belief that there is no God is still a belief. They're not being open minded, they're being close minded themselves because they refuse to open up to any possibility. They won't
Mhm.
accept any argument to the contrary, and they very strictly believe that there is nothing. So they're not open to the possibility, oh, there might be something, but I don't know yet. Convince me or prove it to me. So, in that sense, it becomes very narrow minded themselves, the very same thing they accuse religious people of. In the same way, do you think that this act of saying there is no grand narrative is a sort of narrative itself that they are trying to impose? They're not
Yeah,
saying they're not open to the possibility that there might be a universal truth. They don't say they're open to it. They say no, a strict no. So in that sense, might it be a grand narrative in of itself?
yeah. In the way, it could be a grand narrative in itself because it seems to explain everything about this world, and it
Hmm.
seems to think that is applicable to everyone. Yeah. So you can see the LGBT movement, for example, people who support LGBT movement, right? They 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 tend to believe that this supporting LGBT is politically correct, so they want to impose it on everyone, you know. But they live in a world that is multicultural and multi-religious, so they cannot actually impose it on everyone because not every religion or culture support this idea of LGBT. Only and perhaps a Western humanist um, world do we find support for LGBT in a way. Yeah. So it's the idea is clashing with other ideas, and when we went through all the theories, we find that there are limitations to all the theories. They're not perfect. They are made by humans, um, so they are imperfect. And when we talk about psychoanalysis, there are words that don't lend themselves to psychoanalytic readings and so on. So no theory actually can explain everything, and actually it's perfect. No theory is perfect. So even postmodernist theory is not perfect, and even believers of atheism also have hold on to imperfect ideas about something. Yeah, they could not explain, for example, if you talk about religion, they could not explain. They believe in evolutionary theory because they have got out of the picture, right? So evolution is saying that God is not involved in our creation. It happened because of some kind of evolution, um, from according to Darwin, from the amoeba to something like a human being. And we have evolved from the amoeba into human being, into people. Um, but they cannot explain why all the creations like monkeys, human beings, amoeba are still in existence. All of this exists in the same time frame right now. If evolutionary theory was true, then there will be no amoeba, no monkeys, and all, because we have all evolved into human beings. Okay, so the idea is it's reasonable, but they cannot let it go because they don't believe in God anymore. Yeah. So yes, what you said just now is right. Anyway, their theories are not, what do you call that, perfect. They have loopholes, and they can be questioned, they can be challenged, and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone wants to say anything? Anyone else wants to say anything? No question? Any question?
How do we approach that then? When you mention the LGBT groups, right? When they try to impose this very, I don't like to use the word, but let's say this liberal worldview onto others, and then the religious and conservative faction counters back, and there are that loggerheads with one another. The problem becomes that one group can't accept other people not accepting them, but then the other group can't accept people who accept it.
Yeah,
It becomes a they both exclude each other from whatever dialogue they want to have. Then it
yeah.
becomes
So there's no ending to this dialogue. Yeah, discourse, because even within LGBT, there are people like bisexual who reject um, lesbians and gays. So even LGBT movement is full of people who are contradicting themselves, because they don't have they have a movement. They seem to have a movement, but actually they don't really agree with everything that every member say. Same-sex marriages and all that. Some gays actually do not support same-sex marriages, because they say that the marriage is about a man getting married to a woman. So it cannot be
oh,
like two men getting married to each other. So this is the idea. There's no just I don't know.
so that would be a very post-structuralist, post-modernist type of thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You let's say you wanted to have the same-sex tendencies, but you
Mhm.
don't believe in the institution of marriage because that's an outdated, archaic, whatever.
Mm.
So you say down with that. There's no need for those are all social constructs anyway. Let's just do whatever we want to do,
Mm.
and do the do. Goodness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Somebody wrote something there. But what did that person wrote? Oh, Sydney. Sydneyism. Okay. Okay. Anyone wants to say anything? Anything else? No.
Oh, thank you, Aisha.
Yeah, okay. You want to say something, Nizam?
No, no, that the person who typed out well said. I was like, oh, that's to me. Oh, okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that's for you. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so if you don't have anything else to say, why don't we meet on? We're going to meet. It's not why don't we? It's going to meet on Wednesday. Yeah, and then to go through another set of DT theory. Okay, and then I will also perhaps give you another quiz. You have two more quizzes to go through. Perhaps this time around, I would create a Google quiz, okay, instead of the Italian one, because the Italian one is trying, um, it's meeting with a lot of problems. Yeah,
Oh,
because some people cannot access Italian, so perhaps the next one will be created through Google form. Okay, okay. So I'll see you on all of you on. Um, yeah, let me just go through this if I have forgotten to go through it. Okay, so let us meet on Thursday, Wednesday then. Okay, so bye. Thank you for coming to class. So
thank you,
ciao.
Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.